and welcome to the Innovator Coffee, a podcast that bridges the gap between people and the world of AI and innovation, where Tom and Vicky follow us to explore the top AI applications, ecosystem insights, and the emerging trends. Today, we're honored to have Graham and Sue to be our guest speakers in our podcast to talk about the AI coding. Welcome. And first of all, we would like to invite you guys to introduce yourself. Maybe start with Sue.
Oh, thank you, Vicky, for the kind introduction and the invite. So I'm very happy to join this podcast, and one of the partners in Amino Capital. We have been investing in data-driven startups since 2012, when I was very lucky that I was one of the first ones to join the firm in 2012. And then we very lucky that we have approximately 20 companies achieving unicorn valuation, including in code generation space, which is called Replit. And previously I was a postdoc, and also I was doing entrepreneurship mentorship at Stanford University, and I was CEO of two of spin-off startups from Stanford, CandyHouse, CyteSi. And so I'm very happy to be here.
Graham.
Yeah, so thanks also for the invite. My name is Graham Newbig. I'm the chief scientist at All Hands AI, a open source code generation agent startup, and also a professor at Carnegie Mellon University.
Cool. We know you also start your own startup recently, right? Do you want to introduce a little bit more about your startup?
Yeah, sure. At All Hands AI, we're making a product called OpenHands, which is an open source AI software developer. And the goal of this is to develop kind of the best software development agents that can autonomously do end-to-end software development tasks. And we're not just talking about necessarily code generation, although that's a big part of it. We're also talking about, testing, debugging, maybe even deploying software and stuff like this through using AI agents. And so that's our overall goal. And we have various form factors that developers can interact with. So, for example, a web interface, a offline CLI, or GitHub Actions. So we're trying to give some freedom in both how people use, download, modify the code of the software developers are using and how they interact with it.
Just curious, right? Because I saw you jump from the entrepreneur to the professor and professor to the entrepreneur, like not only once, right? Maybe twice, or like some like hidden question we don't even know, hidden history we don't even know. Like, what makes you think like you want to have those shift again? I'm just curious.
Well, maybe I can talk about like shifting once, which was 2 or 3 years ago. I had a company where we formed the company based on a spin-off of some like technology that we had made at CMU for hallucination detection for LMs. And we actually did this in like 2022, which was before ChatGPT. So it was a very good time had we known how to build a product properly. But like, as I mentioned, we, didn't iterate with customers well enough, and we didn't really have a good product, and kind of got tired of it, not working very well for a while. And one of the other founders decided to leave. So I spun out the company basically. So after that experience, I knew all the things that I had done wrong, and I kind of had a hunger to do it again, basically. And then, this opportunity to do it in an open source way fell in my lap, and I believe very strongly in open source. And I believe that this technology is going to be really powerful, and I want people to be involved. So that's why I decided to do that.
Yeah, so you've been research in the coding area for a long time, right? Yeah, that's what
I started out in the coding area 10 years ago when one of my, which was ridiculously long ago. It was totally not possible 10 years ago with a 10-year-old technology. But one of my students said, wouldn't it be awesome if like neural networks could solve competitive programming problems. I was like, yeah, that would be pretty awesome. They totally can't right now, but maybe we can start working on it. And now here we are.
Okay. Hi, Grant. Nice to meet you. I have a question for you first. Personally, I'm a developer for quite a long time also. I know that this is a very competitive area. So what make you decide to take on this path to become an entrepreneur for AI coding or like a software engineering, in addition to being a professor?
Yeah, so I've been interested in entrepreneurship since I was in high school when I had a company that I spun up. It got a little bit out of hand, and then I had a exit for about $5,000, which was a big thing for a high school student at the time. But I've been interested in it for a long time, but specifically why I decided to do it for this project is the genesis of the project was kind of an open source grassroots bottom up effort that happened shortly after the video of Devon by Cognition. The original name of the project was called Open Devon, but now we've switched the name to Open Hands because we've moved away from just being a copy of Devon, which is admittedly how it started out. But basically the idea was, I think developers really like open source. They really like things that they can download and use and play with and stuff like this. And that really resonated with developers. And it also really resonated with me because I believe that the technology that we're developing now is going to be really, really powerful. And it has the ability to accelerate a lot of the work that we do as developers. It may even possibly pose a risk to developers who don't have access to it. And I wanted to make sure that access to this technology is available as broad as possible. And of course, I could just do it as a research project, but in order to make really useful technology, you need resources behind it. And we felt that a company would be the best way to do that.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, after heard about the entrepreneur and professor story, we'll turn the question to Sue. Sue, I know you're the famous investor, and we'd like to understand from you, why do you think AI coding tends to be a higher valuation startup ideas compared with other AI vertical applications?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Is that absolutely something to do with certainty? Because of the high certainty, and then so a lot of people believe in the future, and then it actually compounded to be now, the valuation will be so high because people had very high expectation, just like autonomous driving. So it will happen, it will happen for sure. And then, so that is why, that's one of the reasons. Well, in the meantime, I would say it's a beautiful business model. So back in 2022, before OpenAI launched ChatGPT, and the hottest conference in that year was actually SaaStr. So because there was no tech bubble, the crypto was all-time low, and not all-time, but it went down to like really low. And also stock market is not doing very well. So the only one thing that people are very passionate about are those profitable company. And who are those profitable company? Oftentimes are those PLG SaaS company, just like business model of Copilots, just like the business model of Replit. So those company, no matter, there is a financial downturn and economics not doing very well, but those company, they're making money. So in that year, I remember that everybody was saying, all investors were saying, if this company is not driven by PLG, product like growth SaaS, we will not invest in them. So if you are a SLG or MLG SaaS, and then you're selling to large company, those company, they're cutting budgets. So it's very difficult to sell to them. However, if you are subscription model, you're cloud-based, you're still making money. And then what happened end of that year was that OpenAI launched ChatGPT, also, Stable Diffusion. And then what happened is they are PLG SaaS. So, generative AI, they are magical. And in the meantime, once they found product market fit, they could be very much profitable. And that's what happened for Replit, right? Replit was founded in 2016, while OpenAI was founded in 2015. Were they very hot? Obviously not, right? So because back then there was no certainty, nobody knew something like this will happen, even Google. So now, well, back then, OpenAI, it was more like a net profit organization, right? Comparing now, it's like a 175 billion. So back then, it wasn't very high valued, very highly valued. And then when Replit just got started, and then they more like a startup for education for little kids, because little kids, they have a difficulty to download all this like database and stuff. So they provide this online IDE for everybody to use, even little kids. Yeah, because of the certainty. That's why it's very high.
I see. Thank you. I have a question regarding large language model itself. Then we're using this for code generation or debugging or every like software engineering related things. We also know that big models have big capabilities, but smaller models have less like latency or other cost. So how big the models that you currently kind of thinking is kind of good enough for like deploying the AI coding models according to your perspective? Maybe this is a question for both of us. Maybe Grant, can you give some input first?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I think in order to answer the question, it might be good to outline some of the reasons why AI software development or AI coding is difficult. And the first reason why it is difficult is just because you need to write code itself. So like you already know the code that you want to write. You could like explain what you want in very specific English and which files you wanted to be editing and stuff like this. If this is the case, I don't think we need a very large code model for generic code. But if we want to be using like specialized libraries, long tail libraries that aren't very common, or other things like this, you either would need to have a very large model that has kind of the knowledge of all these long-tailed libraries, or you need to somehow retrieve the information about the libraries on the fly using something like Retrieval Augmented Generation or RAG. The other reason why coding is difficult is you need to follow instructions very well. And so like I will give very specific, I use my own product in my everyday coding, of course, because I'm a coder and I'm making a product for coding, so I should be using it. So I like to give very specific instructions about how to implement things for my repositories. And these get very, very long because you have kind of like a guide for how to do things and how to develop best practices for the repository. And small models aren't super great at following those instructions. So for those, I feel like you kind of need larger models. And then the final thing, which is even harder, I think even our largest models are not good at right now, is making good design decisions. So I feel like our models are kind of like junior developers, but maybe even worse than junior developers at making good design decisions. So they'll do really, really silly things. Like, for example, I asked the model to improve the documentation of our software repo, but we had a place in the prompt that said, please write tests as necessary. So the coding agent tried to start writing tests to check that the documentation existed. And this is just something really silly. It's no developer would ever do something like this, but there's just all kinds of examples of the agents making bad decisions that no software developer would make. And I think you definitely need bigger models to kind of get the taste. They need to have taste and good programming. And I don't think even our biggest models have that perfectly yet. Then just going by the numbers, right now we're actually evaluating language models for coding agents. And in our framework anyway, Claude was something like 27%, GPT-4o was something like 21%. And then smaller models like open models like DeepSeek or Llama 405B were something like 14%. And then the tiny models like the 7B, 8B models just don't work, barely work at all. So that if you're doing an agentic framework where kind of the model needs to handle all the tasks, and I do think like 70B models are like the table stakes for doing well at that. That might improve as we train specialized agent models, though. Like as I think, in the next year, we're going to see a lot of more specialized agent models for coding or for web browsing or for other stuff like that. And I think then the necessary size for the models is going to drop.
Okay, thank you. Sue, do you want to add more?
Yeah, that's a really comprehensive and explanation, and I learned a lot. I definitely wanted to learn more of what you're building. Seems very interesting. And so for those generic AGI model, it could be like really, really big. GPT-4 is 170 billion parameters, is really, really big, very, very expensive to train. But for coding specific task, LLM with parameter, like 20, 30 billion could be like doing very well, especially accuracy and inference time for generating code. So it's good balance. But of course, you get more data better. Especially, platform like GitHub or Replit, they have unique advantages to train large language model for coding. And just because they actually already have, vast amount of user generated coding data, and then they have this real-time user interactions data that actually can learn how programmers debug and how they actually, do code generation, what kind of mistakes they make, So those are very, very interesting data. Matter of fact, I think last year, Replit open source the model that they trained, and people use it, and then on GitHub, and then it was actually pretty good. So it's all about data.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds very interesting. The next question will still be with the model. Currently, how well are the current state of the art AI coding models handling the multimodal inputs like images and videos? We know it's more like code writing is more like on the text piece, but we do want to know additional information from the image and video and see how they can help on the AI coding piece. Maybe start with Sue this time and then turn to Graham.
That's definitely non-mature. And so we have been looking at, so many companies taking advantage of large language model. And then, as I mentioned, coding is definitely high certainty. It's a good thing because it's solved the supply demand problem for us, right? So there is a lot of top students and professor, from CYU, and then you got excited, you want to start a company. So definitely so many company, but we're still not there yet. And then to understand, images and videos in a way that, it can actually, handling all this multi-modal inputs, and it's definitely not there, but it will definitely enhance coding tasks, and then it would gradually improve. I would say some people take advantage of CLIP, CLIP, and then related models, and in a very large scale, they want to do this, and then because a lot of the models they wanted to actually take screenshots and design mockups. Not just text to code, right? So to generate, HTML or SCC code to recreate layouts, and super interesting, super helpful, and then definitely, increase productivity. So we're watching this space very closely, and then code generation from diagrams, and to understand those diagrams and this flow charts, it's super interesting, right? So I've seen probably just a very few company actually have a good demo. Yeah.
How about you, Graham?
Yeah, it's a great question. And like one thing I've noticed is I feel that the requirements for coding models are very different than the requirements that a lot of people building multimodal models are focusing on. So a lot of the people who are building multimodal models are focusing on understanding of kind of like photographs or other things like this. And so especially a lot of the open models, like the open source models, are just like dismal at OCR. They can't do character recognition very well, and other things like that. On the other side, models like Claude and GPT are actually decent at this, and I expect that this is because they're probably training on lots of data that includes documents or other things like this. And as somebody who likes kind of open models for various reasons, they give you the freedom, they help, seed interesting applications that startups do, other things like this. This was very unsatisfying to me. So actually, we just finished a paper which we'll hope to put on archive soon, where we trained open models with like lots and lots of data from the web, and train them to do like OCR and other stuff like this. And this improves dramatically, but not quite to the point where we get to GPT-4 quality. But I think that sort of direction is going to be really important. And I also kind of hope that if we release these, they'll also be better at understanding computer UIs, and that will allow people to build better models for React apps or whatever other things that people want to do. Video, I have no idea about. Like, I haven't seen any coding model that I haven't even really seen any demos of like video to code. I think it'd be really cool if we had something like that. They probably exist, but I haven't seen them. If we had something like that, that would be really cool.
Yes, we also noticed recently that like, a lot of OCR or like UI related multimodal input to the AI agent coding is kind of emerging. Typically, coding agent can be perceived like perception and memory and action. Last question for perception. Let's another question for actions. How effective are currently coding products right now regarding the action, including generated code, debugging, like external action or internal actions like external like retrieval or like coding APIs, those kind of actions. How well are we right now? Let's ask. Maybe Grant, you can give some input first.
Yeah, it's a good question. Generating code is surprisingly hard, even for our strongest models. And like editing code is even harder. Actually, let me say generating code is not as hard, but editing code is harder. And just to give an example, Claude, which is our best model and makes the fewest mistakes out of the models that we're using right now, still does silly things like it takes in a file that has \n in it, and it converts those into line breaks, which is really annoying because it will break your code when it edits it, because it will have line breaks where it should have had \escape line breaks basically. So even the smallest, silliest things break, and this is annoying as a developer of a system that wants these things to work out of the box. But I think it's something we'll fix with fine tuning and specialized code editing models and stuff like that. And that's something we can think about. All the other things, I feel like they're really good on common debugging tasks, but not very good at long tail debugging tasks. It's kind of like all things. They're good at common knowledge, but bad at long tail knowledge. And this is just kind of another example of that. So they can very easily fix syntax errors, but they're not very good at fixing errors in niche libraries, for example.
Yeah, I'm just curious, right? At the time when we wrote the code, back to the time when I wrote code, right? We wrote code and we wrote the developer notes, right? At the time, like current development stage, can the model identify which part is the code or which part is like developer notes to help people understand the code?
I think so. Mostly, at the very least, it can tell like comments and not comments. It's actually reasonably good at writing code documentation, although sometimes the documentation is a bit superficial. It won't tell you like the deep things that you want to know about the code. It'll just tell you kind of how it works. But yeah, I think the models are pretty smart, but they make silly mistakes a lot of the time too. And when you have an agentic workflow with, 30 steps of actions, you have a single mistake and that can throw off the entire workflow. So
Is it the reason why we start to consider like the open source? Just try to let more people use the model and see how they can make the improvement.
for us, for our company, we are building an open source community around this, and like one of the reasons why is we believe that the software should be free, but on top of that we also believe that it's a good strategy because a lot of people can come together and go in and improve it. And you know uh, people in academia, for example, love to have good platforms where they can increase the numbers on tasks that they care about. So I'm kind of hoping that if we form a community around the software, then a lot of people will come in and use it to improve. So yeah, I totally agree.
Thank you. So do you want to add more, especially for the current products you perceive, like how well they perform right now?
Yeah, I totally agree. And then I felt like for current coding products like Replit, Ghostwriter, and Google AI Assist, and GitHub Copilot, and those are very effective for generating boilerplate code and autocomplete definitely. And then, but recently, and then Replit just launched so-called AGI level 2 AI coder, and then not just autocomplete, but also they can also do text to code and that kind of thing, and not just the real-time coding suggestions. So we're gradually come to reasoning. OpenAI have this definition of 5 level. This is a level 2 of AGI, so it's kind of like a consistent with what's going on. And then, however, as Professor Newbig said, when it comes to debugging and really complex multi-layer system and understanding deep context and really problem solving, and then with logic and creativity, we're not there yet. Especially we've seen company that actually started last year or earlier this year, and they do want to replace such kind of a complex multi-layer system problem, and they wanted to sell to customers. And then internally, we got some feedback that this problem is too big, and then customer feel too little incentive to pay. I mean, even though they pay, they want to pay you maybe $5,000 for top Zooglers, like 5 Zooglers, right? So per year. So it doesn't unit economically, it doesn't make any sense. So that's why a lot of them just dropped. So they don't want to be a consulting company, and making this little comparing to their salary at Google is not comparable, right? So because we're not there yet. So I think this really resonate with AGI's 5 levels, right? So we can consider we're almost at level 2, reasoning. And then level 3 is autonomous AI. And you can really having agents to operate on a user's behalf, right? For several days, you don't have to deal with it, and then eventually problem solved. And level 4 is innovating. So that's not there yet. And then level 5 is really organizational AI. So basically, I think it actually, but eventually we will get there. And it just right now we are at level 2.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just curious, right? what do you think, like from level 2 to level 3, how long the road will be?
Yeah, I feel like that be able to actually operate a couple agents and really work on this problem, and then it have to make sure no human in the loop. However, what current model which really worked are those automation with human in the loop. Sometimes they arbitrage people in India, in Southeast Asia, whatever task they do. Like Torrent.com, they're $1 billion company. They have OpenAI, they have Gemini, everybody. Scale.ai, right? So both of them, they are like $1 billion company, and then they have a human in the loop. So I think those model with human in the loop currently can solve your problem. If you completely trust automation, oftentimes your system will fail and your customer won't be happy.
Graham, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Like, I don't think we're going to have it suddenly like not have autonomous agents that can do all of our work, and then one day have autonomous agents that can do all of our work. Just to give an example, I'm writing code for our own product, and I have a pretty good idea of what it can do and what it can't do. And when I know that it can do something like, a bit of refactoring of our front end, or writing a self-contained new function or something like this, I just ask it to do it, and then I tag our Git pull request, or sorry, our GitHub issue, and it goes in and fixes it for me, and I get a pull request. And that's really amazing. Like, I have limited time to program. I have a lot of things that I'd like to do, but I can't do. And being able to do that with 80% accuracy or 70% accuracy is great. And it doesn't need to be totally autonomous. But what I expect is right now, the reason why that's effective for me is because I know very well what the agents are capable of and not capable of. And I think probably to make this really effective, you will need to couple education about this with like actually selling the product and giving very good scaffolding for the users who are using it and stuff like that. And that's something we're like aiming to do better. But it's pretty magical when it works, honestly. Like, it's pretty amazing, and really, really speeds up your work. And if you think that it's only going to get better, like this is the worst that it's ever going to be, and it's already this helpful, I'm pretty bullish on, this being a real thing and a big thing. And, I think you asked a question about the valuations, and I think like they're not going to be very far off if, in a year or two, this is a real thing and like people really want to use it. So.
Yeah, sounds good. So now we're turning to the other side, right? When customers are choosing AI coding products, what kind of factors do they typically consider from your point of view? And how does the builder versus customer judge the quality of those products? Maybe we'll start with Graham and then Sue. Yeah.
I can go anyway, and then I'd love to hear Sue's answer. But I think SweetBench, like the accuracy on standard benchmarks is one thing that people certainly are looking at. I think SweetBench is good in a lot of ways and has problems in a lot of ways. So I kind of hope that we have better benchmarks soon. Just to give some examples of why it's not great. Like software development is not just coding, and SweetBench is only measuring coding. Also, a lot of the data has leaked into the language model training data, and there are examples of companies getting 50% on SweetBench, where the model just like regurgitates the patch, exactly as is, despite the fact that it wasn't given the patch. So it's complete language model leakage and stuff like this. I think separate from that, there's the interface. Like, is it in an interface that's easy to consume? And I don't think anybody has nailed this yet. Should it be like living in GitHub? Should it be living in a separate app? Should it be living in VS Code or your IDE or things like that? And I don't think anybody has the correct answer to that yet, and we're going to need to figure it out. But those are a couple things that I think about. And also, PR, like all of the standard stuff that people use to think about these things.
Thank you for the information. Sue, how about you?
Yeah. So I remember last year at the Google I/O, and then the big star was actually Replit. So Replit is a collaborator with Google Cloud. And then so the narrative back then, last year was actually, okay, so you can actually be a customer of Google Workplace, and then we provide a code generation tool for you, and then competing with Microsoft plus Copilot. And then that code generation tool was actually offered by Replit. And then, so this year, Google actually have the largest, one of the presenter was actually founder of Turing, which we also an investor. So this year, the narrative was actually, you can use Google Cloud and you don't need to hire engineers. And then you can just use Turing and they hire for you. So for example, your Pepsi, your Allbirds, you can just use Google Cloud and tell you what kind of software you want to build. And then Turing can hire an engineer for you. You don't even need engineers. So basically you can see that marketing is very important. And also, so this is definitely what people expected to be happening, right? So this is what customer expect to happen right now. And then there is already solutions there. And then, well, in terms of, developers, I feel like, it's all about the quality and accuracy, reliability, and productivity boost, and also ease to use. Especially, Replit, they have this online IDE, which was their key feature back in 2016. So they have this advantages. Back then, they have so many existing users. So if you have the magic moment and you have this new products like Cursor, then you really have to provide different kind of like, user interface and different functionality, and for people to really feel the aha moment. So they're different from your non-technical customers. So it really depends on who your customers are. And then, for Cursor, even though they didn't have, previous customer to have a lot of data, but if you have a really good top-notch team with a top-notch research-driven product and with really kick-ass user interface, and then you can still win.
Thank you, Sue. Actually, I'm a developer for a long time. I'm a kind of typical customer. Currently, I'm using Cursor. Besides the reliability and accuracy, the most headache case I have are like copy pastes. Because I want to generate code, I need to generate code based on a lot of context. Let's say we reference a lot of libraries and we reference a lot of codes. I need the AI to consider all the codes, put them in the context, and then generate the code. Hating like reference all the code related codes. So that's why I'm using some kind of related tools. So my question is for the two. There are many like AI coding products right now. Could you comment? Are they kind of similar or they are quite different? What they are? Can you comment on some kind of products they are kind of have some kind of uniqueness and advantages? Yeah, maybe start from Sue.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, so we've seen, some success, right? Replit, Cursor, and then doing very well. And then we also see, tools that actually are designed for specific tasks like debugging and then tests. And then so they're actually focusing on more complex than the multi-layer. So they're very different. And then of course, security, and that's a very hot area, privacy. And then, so that's a very, compliance, right? So it's all very hot areas. But in the meantime, some of them requires a lot of integration, as you mentioned. So those ones that do not have their own data already, and then they found themselves a little bit difficult to ask for integration, to rate companies' existing code, and then they have trust issue, and then so it's kind of like a little bit difficult. So you have to have this killer application, killer usability, right? So to really get trust. And then a lot of companies, they were like, okay, we're a developer tool, and then we wanted to earn trust. So how about open source? And then open source is definitely, there are so many success built on open source, like Confluent and Databricks, right? And then, but for open source, the first couple of years, we have to get ready that before you actually have critical mass, you are not making money. So we have to be patient money to really trust those top-notch builders, and they can really create this beautiful community. So it's more like a long term. And then there was also a lot of coding products that actually supporting different languages. Again, if this is not popular programming languages, if this is programming languages, it's just the spin off from laboratory and then PhD dissertation. It's a little bit risky here because sometimes who knows, some programming languages just nobody cared.
Okay, Grant, how about you?
Yeah, there's a lot, so it's kind of hard to cover all of them. I liked Sue's comments. I kind of view it maybe on the other side about like what problem they're trying to solve, and I feel like you have the copilots and cursors of the world who are kind of trying to solve the, predict the developer's next move or save the developer from doing their next move type thing, which is extremely helpful. I also use cursor myself when I'm in that situation. There's also ones that are very focused on a particular application that have been around for a long time, like automatic test generation or documentation or code understanding or things like that. And then there's kind of the broader ones that are trying to solve maybe all of coding, all of code generation, which is kind of ones like Aider or other stuff like this. They're really focused on code generation, but they're trying to solve all of that through agentic workflows. And then there's ones more like Devin or OpenHands, the one that we're creating, which is more like moving beyond even coding, actually interacting in your environments and solving all of software development tasks. And a lot of them, if you don't look at them very closely, they seem kind of like they're solving similar problems, but actually they're narrower or broader, more synchronous or less synchronous or things like that. And so you kind of need to pick based on the use case that you want to tackle. And I use Cursor and I use OpenHands at the same time because they're solving completely different problems. Autonomous finishing of full, issues, or like predicting my next step and making that investment.
Thank you.
I think we can use a lot of different ways to categorize the AI coding, right? But I think one way to categorize is agents and copilots. So my question this time is, in the AI coding space, which do you think has more potential, agents or copilots, and why? Graham, do you want to do first this time?
Sure. I mean, I don't really think it's either or. I think both of them are going to be as I said, I think both of them are going to be used together. What I would say is copilots are ready for prime time and they're being used a lot right now, but I think there's less low-hanging fruit there. Like they're already really good and they're going to be maybe a little bit hard to improve further. Whereas for agents, they're obviously not really, they're not mature technology yet. So there's a bigger kind of space for further improving them. And so from that point of view, I think agents have a lot more potential. Like we haven't realized their potential yet because, the technology is not completely mature yet. So I think they're going to expand a lot more. And if I had to predict, I would say that probably, most of code will be written by agents, and most of code in technology aware cutting edge technologies will be written by agents in about like maybe a year or two. A year would be optimistic, 2 would be pessimistic. But I could be wrong, but I'm reasonably sure about that estimate.
Sue, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then I definitely think if you ask any founder, CEO of tech giants, in those dinners and talks that I went to, and then everybody said the most interesting area is agents. And then because, economically, for software development industry, it's $1 trillion industry, right? So it's very, very expensive to hire software coders. So that's one thing. And on the other hand, during pandemic, digitalization is the adoption rate is like 600% year over year. So even pharmaceutical company are hiring engineers. Branding, consumer brands company like Pepsi or Birds are hiring engineers. That's why Torrent.com has grown so fast to be a $4 billion company now. So of course, everybody was super excited about AI agents. And then, but in the meantime, there are already people that actually take advantage of this PR. And then company like, we invested in Replit, they just launched their Replit AI agent. And then people tried it out on Twitter. There was this 4-year-old little girl, and they made a GIF just within like a couple minutes. It was just amazing. Such kind of story just make those non-technical people kind of like they can create apps, they can actually build things, and then what they can do next. Obviously, like rapidly build up this marketplace for companies to actually hire non-technical coders, which is amazing. And then you can self-train to be an engineer. And then that's what we just mentioned. This is the, level 2, right? So AI reasoning. So this is exactly, why people are passionate about.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? The developer's competitor actually is not AI. It's somebody who can be very creative and think very logical, right? This is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to add add one point to that though. I feel like right now agents make it very easy to get from 0 to 1, or maybe not even agents, maybe just code generation systems. Getting from 1 to like anything past 1 is very hard for any like reasonably complex system. And so I think we're going to see a lot of help for kind of amateurs who are not coders get from 0 to 1 or 0 to 2 or something like that. And then it might not be coders, but it might be software architects or software engineers who are still necessary to get you from 1 to 100 or 1,000 or whatever. I don't want to overhype agents, despite the fact that I believe in them very strongly. I still think the human touch is going to be necessary there.
Thank you. Next question is regarding the performance of agents. Personally, I'm very interested in like retrieval and API calls, especially those action-related things. And do you think that current performance of these reasoning and the retrievals and the API calls are good enough? Or you mentioned that is it better to train specific task-related agents, like debugging agents, API calls, or whatever, or have a general one? Which one's better? If you train specific agent, maybe you need the multi-agent collaborations. So how well is a multi-agent collaboration right now? Yeah. Maybe Grant, do you want to add? Do you want to input?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There are advantages to multi-agent systems, but actually, I just wrote a blog called "Don't Sleep on Single Agent Systems," where I make arguments against building multi-agent systems. And the reason why I argue against this is from a couple perspectives. The first one is maintainability, and multi-agent systems get rather complex rather fast. When we first started out, building our software, people were very excited about multi-agent systems and implemented a whole bunch of them and stuff. But in the end, a strong single agent system was just better because you could focus more effort on improving it. There could be benefits in training models for specific tasks, but recently our models are decently sized models are good enough at learning just all the tasks you want them to do. So why not just train one big model that can do debugging and testing and other things like that. And there might be efficiency arguments, but serving a 7dB model is not that expensive. I would argue that you can probably just come up with a model that does all of those things pretty well. Retrieval, which you mentioned, is tricky. From my point of view, there's no adequate code retrieval models at the moment. And we actually had a paper called Code RAG Bench where we tried to evaluate this. And in those cases, basically the retrieval model was the bottleneck more than the reader models. So I think that is definitely an area of improvement. And if we have any embedding company people listening, creating better embeddings for code would be really exciting, I guess, or better retrieval models for code. So,
thank you. Sue, do you want to add?
Yeah. So I think it's definitely very challenging, but very, very interesting way of training, couple agents and work together. And, we've seen companies, which especially in the low-hanging fruits, code generation agents, train on different code, and the database code base to generate code and train code review agents and, and also testing agents and let them work together. So we definitely seeing people are trying to do it this way, some examples, but it's very, very difficult to predict, and control the behavior. So a lot of them, they do open source, and oftentimes, open source, when you ask about the use case, a lot of times they will say financial institution, they are price sensitive, they're not price sensitive. And if you go to Money 2020 and then you've seen the CEO of DataBridge and Confluent are giving talks, because they love to, they're engineers, they're not really trained to do this type of task. So they're okay to pay for it. But the problem is your agents sometimes are not predictable. That's a huge problem, and they have a difficulty to adopt your agents. So how to actually make it more reliable on those very complex tasks, and then is going to be really interesting. Yeah, we want to see more.
Sounds like if multi agents work together, it's very hard to scalable on the business side, huh?
If this model is working on very specific problem, and then so they can actually do it very well, then even though the domain is it's very small domain, but people are willing to pay. And then there is just this balance, and then I give you some example, like, we're signing off, right now, all the CEO, including partners in firms, we sign off a lot of SaaS products. I can tell you all the SaaS products, don't ask me the price, because they're only targeting VC, and then the price is like, could be like 50 times more expensive than normal SaaS products. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, interesting perspective. We talk about a lot of interesting perspective for AI coding already. Now we want to turn the question to the challenge of AI coding, right? Specifically, how can you address the challenges that AI coding assistants face, like runnability or memory usage challenges? Maybe start with Graham and then turn to Sue.
I think from my point of view, the two major challenges are maybe three: reliability, cost, and speed. And reliability is just going to be, a battle. We have lots of ideas about how to fix it, like how to better localize bugs, how to better improve code editing, how to train models on data from, on agentic data. Also, just wait for the frontier models to get better is another thing. But that's just a lot of different things. For cost, there's actually been developments that make this surprisingly reasonable, and one is the appearance of prompt caching. And so it started out with Google Gemini, and then very quickly Anthropic followed, DeepSeek followed, OpenAI followed, and basically prompt caching. What it does is it allows you to look up previously used prompts and then pay only like 1/10 the price if you use that prompt again. And this is super, super important in agentic applications, because agentic applications, you repeat the prompt and you repeat the history over and over and over again every time you take a step. And so it effectively makes our costs go down by, a very large amount, by, almost maybe 6x or 8x or something like that. So that's huge. Also, I expect like smaller models to get better, so that will probably help out with that. So I'm not super worried about cost, although it can be high right now. And then the final one is speed. For solving very large tasks, it's still a lot faster than a human programmer if it works, but we kind of can't, task models with solving really, really hard tasks yet, because they're not reliable enough yet. So we kind of need to split them off into bites. But like, one of the best things about using AI agents is you can parallelize instead of doing them in serial. So that's why, like, I don't know, I like agents kind of. One of the big benefits of agents over copilots, and so you can break up a bigger task into 7 smaller tasks, and 4 of them can be done in parallel. So that speeds up by 4x or something like this. So I think all of these are challenges, but they all have feasible solutions. It's just going to take some time to actually develop them. So yeah, those are some that I can think of.
Sue, how about you?
Yeah, we've seen, startups, they oftentimes they want to raise a lot of money, and then we ask them, we were looking at the budgeting, and then we were like, wow, it's so expensive to actually achieve certain reliability, because for complex projects for their customers, and reliability is paramount. So you have to actually buy all these GPUs, and sometimes they will say, oh, Together.ai agreed to take us, and that's a milestone. So you can see how competitive, how cost is such a sometimes not sensitive anymore, because VC, we're paying for the bill, and then they have to make their customer happy, and then it's very, very expensive. And then also, if you wanted to actually work on speed, and as you said, you have to spend a lot of time to testing and debugging. So it depends on what kind of product you want to deliver to your customer. So I think, in very early days, and there are a lot of experiments, and I think we are very, founder friendly, and sometimes we see they actually switch because it's too complex, right? So some of the founders, they are not very experienced, and then they completely pivot to something else and not do code generation anymore. Because this industry is different from crypto, from social, mobile, and local. And then this industry is more like a research driven, a little bit like that. And also you need the best coder. Sometimes if you have a couple of winners and medalists of IOI, and then you actually get higher valuation, because this is very complex and this requires talented people, years of training, and some talents, not just training to actually solve this problem. So I felt like that is why it is expensive to invest in such kind of company.